This video contains gratuitous use of profanity and uncomfortable pauses to compensate for lack of professionalism and original thought. Viewer discretion advised.
Coming to you live from Castle Frankenstein, we bring you the Nerdy Manroom show with your hosts, Hassel and Monster. Monster, we got a monster episode.
Yeah, we do. We're going to go after my namesake this week. We're going to talk about our top 7 monsters. And in the honorable mentions, I will preface up front that we decided not to do Geek Week this week because we were going to have actually Big Rob on doing this with us. And unfortunately, the weather bug got him, so he's kind of under the weather for the moment, but he'll join us hopefully on our next episode because he has some time and opportunity to do that. But before we jump into our list of our top 7 monsters, let's go ahead and thank our sponsor, These Own Collectibles. You can find them on the internet at theseowncollectibles@gmail.com and on Facebook at These Own Collectibles, or in their store at 305 Main Street, Tifton, Georgia. Visit them for all your nerdy needs, from comics to Legos, trading cards, toys, games, and more. Help them support the local artist community by supporting their cause of bringing unity through community. Fandoms unite. And with that, let's jump straight into it because we got a lot of them to go over. So just like any other of our top lists, we will go through these, excuse me, in no specific order. The weather bug's trying to get me now too, apparently. But we will go through this in no specific order. It's just our top 7. It's a completely subjective list. It's whatever we decided was some of the top monsters in media out there, whether it was film, mythology, animation, TV, comics, toys, whatever. We just wanted a chance to hit on some of ours and say why we thought they were cool, and we'll kind of get into that as we go through them. But again, if you want to share anything on our list, or if you want to share your own list with us, we'd love to hear that in the comments. But with that, Hassel, I think we're ready to go. And I was going to say Big Rob would go first, but since he wasn't able to join us, I think it's your turn to go first.
Sweet. Well, I'm going to kick things off, and this is the only one I put in any particular order, and the only reason I did this is because, to me, if you really think back, he's the one that kind of just kicked everything off for the monster craze, so to speak, and that is Dracula, the vampire. Well, you know, at the end of the day, you know, Bram Stoker wrote it, you know, it's what, late 1800s, you know, and then, you know, you started having, you know, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, and things of this nature. But, you know, he was kind of the big, you know, let's kick the damn door open. I mean, you had some boogeymen, so to speak, but he was the one. And then, you know, in 32, they done, you know, he was the first universal monster. And that's what just sparked the craze, and the American people were captivated.
And I think that's a fair one. I honestly did not pull any of the classic, like, Universal style monsters or any of those classic ones like that, just because, to me, as cool as those are and they started everything, I lean more towards the slightly different ones, and for different reasons of why I thought they were great monsters, whether it was because of their scariness or their rareness or whatever. But for me, my first one on my list, honestly, was the one I had to go to this one first, just because he's the king of the monsters, but I went with Godzilla.
Ooh,
like
that made my list, but I done it as Titans.
So I didn't do all the Titans just because I don't think they're all as good a monster as he is. And he is not a scary monster. He's more of a sympathetic or a hero one a lot of times. But just think about, to him, we're nothing more than the ants on the ground. I mean, he's making sure the ecosystem is right, but other than that, we're just kind of in the way. True. So, like, yeah, I had to throw him in here just for that simple fact of, hey, he's this giant thing. He exists. He takes care of the planet. He's not really a bad guy per se in the common sense of that, but I thought we couldn't do the list without him somewhere on it, at least for me.
Well, see, that's on mine. I kind of went with Titans in general, and I was like Godzilla, King Kong, dragons just in general. Big dragons are always mythological figure monsters. The big Titan, you know, the Kraken, shit like that. That was kind of like amongst my Titans. I come in at one selection for me.
So I will say, and we can mention these going in long order at the end if we don't mention them before then, but our honorable mentions, I kind of broke all the Titans out separately just because when I was looking, I was like, some of them don't do much for me, and some of them, like King Kong, it's a giant ape. So I get it. He's a Titan, but at the same time, I don't see him the same way, I guess. But for honorable mentions for me, I did have King Ghidorah in there because he is
He's
out of all
badass.
those, he's probably outside of Godzilla, he's probably the most badass one they have,
The
right?
one that was the hardest one for me not to loop in there was Mega Godzilla, just because robot and not a real monster. The monster was a human operated him. So we're probably the scariest fuckers on the planet.
And you know what? It's very similar vein to that, and it didn't make my honorable mentions just because I looked at it as a robot and not a monster. But the Terminators are kind of like that too, because they exist. They're robots, but they exist on their own. So as a human, they are kind of monsters, but not in the same sense, I guess.
They're not necessarily evil as it is. They're just following their programming. I mean, they're wired to do what they do, and that's what they do. It's no different than a microwave heating up your dishes. It's what it's designed to do.
That's a fair point. So you had your first one was Dracula, and then it was Titans your next one, or do you have, or was that an honorable mention?
No, that was one of my selections. Like I said, the rest of mine aren't really in any particular order. So I think I'll go ahead and piggyback off of you there because we were discussing this. I figured you, I, and Big Rob will probably all cross pollinate on some of these anyways.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and throw my next one out then, so we're on the same level. But mine was the Kraken from Greek mythology, and it's not even so much that I thought that was a scary monster, because a lot of times you don't even see all of it, or you have the vision that maybe it's just a giant squid. The whole reason I put it on here is because I honestly, and I'm not. This is not a phobia or a fear of mine, but drowning seems to be a terrible way to go. And this one, I think, drowns you even long before it eats you, because it's dragging you under the sea at the same time. So it's like you are probably dying before it even eats you anyway. But it's the whole
Release
thought
the Kraken.
It's the whole thought of you can't get away from it, and you're going to die no matter what. Whether it eats you or whether you drown, you ain't getting away.
Have you ever noticed, no matter whether it's the squid type creature or the, I guess whatever the thing is from the Titan movie, excuse me, you never really get a full vision of what the Kraken is.
Yes.
You only get like glimpses of an eye, tentacles, or a human, half torso in the water.
And and it'll come up later in my list, but for some things, for monsters like that, that's the scarier thing to me. It's like we really don't know exactly what all it is outside of very small glimpse of it.
Probably the best one of those I've seen in a long, long time, as far as modern, was in the first Hellboy, when Rasputin's trying to get, whatever it is he's worshiping, and you only get like glimpses of portions of it. Like the human mind can come up with something far more evil than what, you can design.
Yes, it can. So with that, what do you have up next?
I look at slashers as a whole, pretty much, because I mean, you got Freddy, you got Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Ghostface, so many different ones, and they're just random ones in various movies that it's just the slasher himself. The American people love to see a good slasher movie, whether he's supernatural or not.
So on that, I had Freddy as an honorable mention. At one point, I ended up taking him off just because I had so much on here. I wanted to just cut the list down, but he stands out to me some. But you mentioned one that I got to ask about, because we were having a debate about this the other day in the car, me and the kiddo. It was the Ghostface, because I guess he and one of his friends on Discord were watching. They were doing a watch party and watching the first Scream, and he's like, I don't get it. I was like, you don't like scary movies? He's like, no. He said, I don't. He said, but I didn't get this one, and it wasn't that. He said, there's jump scares at times where he just pops up at you. He said, but I don't get it, because the whole thing is this guy calls you and warns you he's coming, and then he's a guy in a costume. He's like, if you come at me like that, he said, I'm sitting there with a gun. He said, what you going to do with that knife? I was like, fair point.
Oddly enough, they always somehow they plot. They're almost like, no matter who is Ghostface, and it changes every movie. No Ghostface is the same. It's always a different Ghostface every movie, and sometimes it's multiple Ghostface. Or usually it is. But somehow they thought out their traps, almost like Jigsaw or Batman. Like they have thought them out well enough that they've got all their bases covered. And as much as I didn't think I would enjoy this last one because it's set in New York, it wound up being a pretty damn good movie. There's a good twist in there that I really didn't expect. At certain points, it's like, okay, it's starting to get predictable. But there's some really good kills in it.
And I thought, to myself, I was like, he's got a point in this. And that one just doesn't come off across the same to me, I guess, some of the others. Because even though Michael Myers isn't really supernatural, it's still he's a force of nature. Nothing stops this fool.
Those are the more scary ones to me. Like, literally, if you'll watch the first, say, 4 Friday the 13th, he's not quite supernatural yet. I mean, yeah, he has took some damage that no mere mortal can take. Just like in the first few Michael Myers movies, he had took shit that you just don't do. But it was like the more they killed, the stronger they got, like a force of nature type deal.
Yeah.
That's more terrifying to me because it's just an unstoppable killing machine that's human. Like once you become Freddy or, the later Jason with a zombie Jason, all right, short of blowing this son of a bitch up, you're fucked. So.
Yeah, and I was sharing some of that because it was an interesting conversation, but also the last part of that conversation I have to share with you because he made mention of something about, and I didn't realize this because I don't really watch him that much, but I guess this last one, like you said, was in New York City area, right? He's like, so what if he messed up and called the wrong house and he called the Xavier Institute? I was like, oh, better stay away from there. You come busting in the door, stab a Wolverine. What's going to happen?
He might have a pretty good point there, but you tell him he needs to. He come stay about 2 weeks with Uncle Hassel this summer, and I can educate him in the horror world.
He's not too big on it, but he watched that one with his friends because they were watching it. And I think one of the little girls that he talks to.
Oddly enough, I'm not super big on the screams. I'll watch them, but those seem to grab the people that even aren't horror fans. I don't know what it is about them. They're poppy culture enough, I guess, where it just seems to grab people. Like your typical non-horror fan will watch those, I guess. We'll get there.
I would tell you, and this is a quick aside before we get back to our list, because I know we've got to stay on it and make sure we get through it. But one of the horror movies that got me in it, I don't know if it's even really horror, just more suspense, but it freaked me out more than anything else was the Final Destination movies. And the first one, man, when them logs come off that log truck, hell no.
Dude, I remember we went to the theater to watch that. And I was like, holy shit. And the whole way home, I was scared to put my head back in the seat because I just was like, I'm driving like this right here. And it's like, when you're coming back from Douglas, that's a rough road. It's like, God.
There is no monster in that movie, but at the same time, it's like, that movie will freak you out some.
And you do got the Candyman in there is a voice. Anytime you got Tony Todd in there, you got some gold.
So let's make sure we get back to our list. So I'm going to take a far cry different turn from where we've been so far, and I'm going to go to the Power Rangers franchise because it's a constant monster of the week, right? And honestly, none of them are really scary for the most part. There's one or two that were freaky looking, and one of those made my list. Now I'm going to say that if I was choosing it based on scariness, the only one you could have chose was Zed because he was the only one who had any kind of impact in that way. Now they toned that down so quickly that it didn't last. But I will say that there was one monster of the week that was so freaky to me, and it is because of a phobia I do have, and that was Eye Guy, where he was made completely out of eyeballs. So, first of all, it's freaky looking, but secondly, all I can think about is those sharp weapons that they all have coming at that eye, and I can't stand things going in my eye. So as soon as I see him on the screen, anytime that episode is on, my eyes start watering up immediately. I'm like, no, because I can't stand to put eye drops, much less something a little sharp coming towards my eye. It freaks me out so bad just because of that.
Get me. Zed was actually a very menacing looking. I mean, if he hadn't been in the world of the Power Rangers where he become campy at some point, that could have been like you could see him in a true horror movie. Like you can envision him as a Cenobite or something of this nature. Like you can see him giving Pinhead a good old run for his money down in the labyrinth. But yeah, he was a very good one. Before we get back on the beaten path, I gotta ask, because me and the Gremlins been watching Power Rangers every single day because it's like Papa Rangers, Papa Rangers. So who is and I've seen him like 2, maybe 3 episodes now. It's like this big Japanese head with feathers, and he opens his mouth, and like it's winds and shit comes out.
He was just a floating head.
Yeah,
Lothar.
Well, what's the deal with that? Because I can't hardly pay attention to the episode.
In the Japanese episodes, I think he is a powerful wizard that is somehow has something to do with Rita and her crew, or Bandora in that case. So on here, they just used him as a off the beaten path wizard to have in certain episodes to bolster her power that she set loose on them along with a monster or something. So he really didn't have a whole lot of plot points, but they would just break him out every now and then. They're like, oh, this monster's more powerful than we usually fight. Oh, because he's empowering it.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I gathered. I was like, this is random as hell. Where did this come from even?
Yeah. He was much more of a major character in the Japanese series, but
I got you. Would make sense.
So back to the regular path. What do you have next?
Well, whether you call them fighters, living dead, or walkers, zombies. Zombies had to be on the list.
I figured you had them because I was going to put them in, and I was like, nah, you probably got those covered. I'm going to take a different path on my next one, but yeah, those are always creepy.
Yeah, regardless of what you call them, they're just, and there's so many different ways to do them. That whether you go the old George Romero way, the Walking Dead way, Greg Nicotero, or if you just go, Snyder and they're running at your ass, or 28 Days Later. I mean, those are the truly terrifying ones there. They can run at your ass. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, those are quite worse to me. Whether if they can think or if they can run, or if they have muscle memory, like in the last season of Walking Dead, they started climbing up stuff again like they did on the first ones, and they had more of a thought process. And I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute now."
It is crazy how they kind of shifted gears. It seemed like between season 1 and 2.
Well, and then it didn't come back to the very last season. Then in the last few episodes, they get cornered, and some of the zombies start climbing over stuff, and they're all like, "What in the hell?" Because they're not used to it. They're like, "Oh, I can get up on this roof. I'm good. I'm away."
Yeah, they just
And they do it in one episode, and the guy's like, "Oh, it's a whisperer," because they think it's one of them dressed up, and they find out he goes to pull the mask off, and it pulls the whole flesh of the face off. He's like, "It's not." It freaked them out so bad. I was like, "That's a good way to introduce that. Play it out."
I need to go back and finish that. I quit watching when Rick got wrote off the show, and I watched like 2 episodes after that, and my stubbornness was like, I can't do it. Now I want to go back and finish it just because I want to see the spinoff with Maggie and Negan. That has some legs for me. I don't know if I'll do Daryl in France. I'm not sure, but
well, and they're introducing even more variants in that new show with Maggie and Negan. Like there's one that's got like 4 arms or something, and and I've seen something in there about them. They may the Fear of the Walking Dead may actually introduce a cure for the bites and stuff.
Well, the thing to me is like the fact that Negan and Maggie would work together. And so I don't know how the seasons ended, and how the series ended to where, I know they had to coexist a few times. So I'm not quite sure how their relationship developed. But,
It happened over that last season. So if you watch it, you'll get that. I mean, honestly, the season or two, the season before the last one, and maybe even half of the one before that, I think because Rick disappeared and went 9.
Yeah, that's about where I stopped.
Half of 9, all of 10 were kind of meh, but 11 was pretty good.
I did see where Jeffrey Dean Morgan said Negan kind of takes a step back and reverts a little bit to old Negan in the new series. That's where he's been his most interesting to me.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
So what you got next, Monster?
I'm going to jump to the comics for a minute, and I had to pull one from the comics that I think most people don't think about, but to me, because of what it is, and for one, there's some body horror aspects to it, and then for two, there's it's a complete change of personality for this character, but it's the Parasite from DC Comics. So, and I think they've retconned his backstory a couple times, but in the most recent ones, I think he's been he was just a janitor at Star Labs or whatever, got turned into the Parasite. So he was just a normal guy. Not necessarily the greatest guy or a super nice guy, but just a normal guy who's going to work, just turned into this monster thing, and he can't control his cravings. He's trying to do all these horrible things just to survive, but it's not because of him, his personality. It's because he has to live. And so it'd be kind of frightening to me to be stuck in that situation of, okay, I've turned into this, so how do I continue to survive even if it hurts other people? So I was like,
you ever been really hungry? I mean,
yeah.
You'll be like, fuck this. I don't care. Feed me. You become a monster.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if you had to survive, really survive.
And then, like in this most recent Action Comics run I was reading recently, he ends up getting split off into a bunch of little pieces. Like he absorbs some energy, then explodes out, and there's little small versions of him running around trying to absorb more. And then Superman convinces him like the only way you can get the power you want is to reabsorb them because he's trying to get him back together so he can fight him. And he starts absorbing them, and he's got like little heads and arms and stuff sticking out. I was like, that gets even creepier when you do stuff like that. And I was like, that's already kind of tragic to begin with.
A comic book honorable mention that I would have had, and I don't know how it escaped me until just now, would probably been The Brood.
So they're
pretty fucking creepy to me.
They were an honorable mention to me only because they got beat out by something that was similar to them, but it was much further along the scale as far as worse.
That's probably my other honorable mention. I almost know where you're going with that.
Yeah, I'll leave it alone until we get there, and I'll let you go ahead next with your next one.
Next on there, man, I got the Wolfman. Werewolves. You can't. I mean, that. I've always been a werewolf fan. Growing up, I think the first werewolf movie I really truly remember is Howling, the first one. And I just remember that, being so captivated by it. And then, Silver Bullet come along. I really loved it. It's one that I'll still sit here and break out occasionally and watch from time to time. My wife, she hates when I cut it on now because she's done had to watch it probably at least 20 times since in the short time we've been together. But those are two great ones. And I will not, I don't care what part. There are certain movies, it doesn't matter how far into it is, there could be 10 minutes left. You're going to fucking watch it if it's on. And the remake of Wolfman is that way for me. But with Del Toro, I fucking love that movie. So him and Sir Anthony Hopkins are magic on the screen together. The effects with Rick Baker, there's some great kills in it. I mean, it's awesome.
I would say I've always liked the werewolf concept. I guess for me, the only reason I wouldn't put them on a list like this is just because there's so many variants. And it's like, all right, how many are good, how many are bad? Like Werewolf by Night. But the body horror aspect of the transformations, man, it's like every one of them that does that tries so hard to make that look so painful that it's like, oh.
Well, let me ask you this, Monster. Are you more of a two-leg stand-up like your Underworld werewolf, or are you an all-four-leg on-the-ground werewolf like American Werewolf from London?
I prefer the two-leg ones just to differentiate from an actual wolf type form.
That's what makes it the Wolf Man to me. That's honestly the only flaw I have with American Werewolf in London, and I love that movie, honestly. The kills are great in it, that you get just enough glimpses of things to envision what's going on, but I really wish he'd have been a wolf man versus, the Kessler wolf there where he's on all four. Because the head on it is still like incredibly crazy looking good.
Yeah, that's a fair one. For me, my next one, I went back to TV a little bit and I went to Doctor Who because he's got so many monsters of the week. There had to be something there. For me, the one I chose for them though was The Silence.
Ooh, those are good. That's a good one.
They are not quite the creepy. I mean, they're creepy looking, but they're not quite the creepiest looking ones. But it's the whole fact of it. As soon as you look away, you forgot that they were there, even though you've been dealing with them. You could have been dealing with them for an hour with them standing right in front of you. But as soon as they move for 1 second, why was I here for the last hour? That freaks me out so much. Just like what damage could they do that you just don't know about?
You know what? They always reminded me of that the bald-headed smiling man off Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
I forget what their deal was. I just remember being incredibly creeped out by them.
And I will say I didn't pick anything from one of my favorite shows of all time, Supernatural. I didn't pick anything from it, but the first couple seasons, the way the Reapers looked when they weren't the talking to them directly and kind of looking like a cute girl or something, it was the first couple of seasons of them that they had were very creepy looking. They were like very old and desiccated looking. When they would see them, I'm like, they remind me of The Silence too. I'm like, that's kind of creepy looking because they were always there lurking around as well.
So this is why I really wish Big Rob would have been able to record with us tonight, because I was totally crutching on you and him to do all the sci-fi monsters. So I'd be able to talk about them. Because I was like, I wanted to put a bunch of those in there. I was like, no, that'll be on the Rob and Monsters list. And I can selfishly pull the horror while they do that.
Yeah, well, I've got some horror in here too, but it's not quite as much as what yours would be. But with that, what did you have next? Let me double check, make sure we're on the right path. You've got 2 left?
I do have 2 left.
Okay, make sure we're on the right number because we crossed over a couple of them.
2 honorable mentions, but my next one is demons. Just demons in general, whether it's a Cenobite, a possession, the exorcist, or however you want to do it. The demonic. I mean, you got everything from The Conjuring to Night of the Demons. One of the creepiest ones that blew me away and my mother should be fucking banned from life to let me watch this. There's a movie called The Gates of Hell, and I actually rewatched it when I was on night shift a couple of years ago. It's a very early 80s horror movie, but essentially this priest at the very beginning of the opening scene is this priest hanging himself from this big tree. It's like, and that's pretty fucking, like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I mean, as an adult, it should do that. But, basically the gates of hell is in this one place. And it's like very evil there. So it makes people start doing stuff. And there's like just multiple scenes. The movie in itself is kind of weird. It's one of those Italian guys that done horror they went for pure gore. But there's a scene I remember, and there's 2 kills in this movie that's just, to this day, I've never seen anything like them. One of them is this guy. He's a real perverted guy. He's like got a blow up doll and all this shit. This possessed person gets after him and puts his head down in a vise and then runs a drill through the temple of his skull.
Oh.
Dude, even now, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And the other is this guy and this girl, they're in the car. They're kind of making out a little bit. The next thing you know, you see like her eyes get like real bloody. She starts vomiting her guts.
Ugh.
And I'm talking like this is slow mo, like, dude, they're just coming out. Like,
oh no.
And there's this creepy music playing the whole time. It's like, holy shit. That movie, like, just, like, whew. So, whether it's a supernatural with demons or like I said, Cenobites in themselves, because everybody loves a good pinhead horror, but just the fact that, a lot of times it possesses some random person.
Yeah.
And there's so much that you could do with it. I mean, you can't beat a good demonic story.
I came close to doing something with demons and stuff, and I was like, nah, I'm going to leave that out. For one, I figured you would cover it. For 2, I was like, As much as I almost consider them another species altogether versus a monster, I guess. But I mean, some of these are anyway. But still, I don't know. It was just something about it. I had to separate from it. But speaking of that, I will say one of my next ones. The last 2 are my 2 scariest ones, at least for me. And I'll say that one of those is a species, and it was the xenomorphs from Aliens.
That was my honorable mention, and that's where I knew you was going a while ago. Yeah,
the closest second I could come to this would be the Brood, but as scary as the Brood are, it's not the same. Aliens is far scarier, and it's like they are just. I mean, the Brood at least have a hive mind. So do the xenomorphs, but the Brood have the ability to think on a higher level. The xenomorphs are just superior. Animalistic nature.
They're hunters, nothing more. Your prey. They're your prey, your meat. And the thing is, I don't only think they even kill you to eat. That's not. It's just to reproduce.
It's just to replicate.
Yeah. So I mean, it's those right there, and they're so cool at hiding. I mean, like they just some of the best parts is when they're like you're like walking around, and then all of a sudden it's just like a tail drops down, and it's like that's your ass. It's over, buddy.
Yeah, and I would say, in comparing them again to the Brood, it's like the Brood comes straight at you, whereas the xenomorphs are like they're trickier and they're
very cunning.
It's very much like the Brood would be like a dog, whereas the xenomorphs are like a cat. They just sneak up and attack out of nowhere for no damn reason at all.
I can get with that right there. That's definitely a good analogy.
It's the best one I had at the moment. This is the After Dark episode. It's pretty late for us to be recording, honestly.
There you go.
My brain doesn't function quite as well at this time of night. But just with that,
sputtering.
What do you have for your number one, or for your last one, I should say?
I couldn't do a list but not do Frankenstein. I just couldn't get judgment. He's one of the greatest universal monsters to me. Aside from Dracula. I mean, I'm just saying him, Wolfman, Dracula are my top 3. I mean, you got Mummy and the Gill Man and all this shit, but Frankenstein was super cool. He's so sympathetic. He's a sympathetic monster. Like
Yeah.
you feel terrible for him, but at the same time he does these horrible things, and you know it's not out of malice initially, but then over time he becomes to hate man. And so I loved all the old Universal movies, especially the ones where you get like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Frankenstein versus Dracula. Things of that, those were really really cool to me. Like we will never get that. Closest thing we got to that was that shit storm of Van Helsing. And I will say, as bad as the vampires look, that their werewolf looked great, but their Frankenstein was a little. To me, the best modern interpretation of a Frankenstein is the Frankenstein from Penny Dreadful. Did you watch all of that?
I didn't. I started watching that, and I never made it past the first season. I got partway through it, and I just stopped watching it for whatever reason, and never went back to it.
If you can get back into that, dude, that show is so fucking good. Because by the end of it, you do get Dracula, and I do a little tweak to him. But I love their Frankenstein. How he was, pretty much Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein himself was just, he abandoned him. And that was the thing. And then later he creates another one that's wound up being perfect. And he starts grooming him up. And then next thing you know, you just see this arm bust through him and rip up. And it's the original Frankenstein monster. And he's went through so much. And when you start looking at his backstory, he is also very tragic. Like, because he just locked him away. Like, I think it's scary. If I remember properly, it scared Dr. Frankenstein that he actually done it. So he locked him away, like to where he needed that skin time, basically.
Yeah.
Like a child. Because I mean, you got to think these are like children when you do this. So he needed that skin time. Instead, he locked him away, and he kept feeling punished. And then he turned him loose and abandoned him and all this shit. And then he went off to places and was abused again in other places. And was revered as a monster. Then he just winds up becoming one, but he becomes a very intelligent monster. It's like that Frankenstein learns. He works in a theater at one point, and he learns, gets educated, and when he comes back for Victor, ooh, it's yeah, that's probably the best modern interpretation of Frankenstein that I've ever seen.
I'm gonna have to go back and finish that show because I just got out of it.
Because they had the Wolfman in there. It's Josh Hartnett. He winds up being a Wolfman, and there's an Indian guy that's a pretty cool Wolfman there too. I mean, you got vampires in there. I mean, you got a little bit of everything in there. I mean, James Bond is a vampire killer in this.
I did start it. I just never finished it. But speaking of finishing, I'll give you the last one from my list, and this one was probably the scariest one to me, and it's The Thing from John Carpenter's The Thing.
I've got to be the only person that is just so blown away by this movie.
So it's not the movie. So I will say that the scary part about this one to me is the fact that it does make all the people distrust each other, because how could you trust each other when you don't know what it is? To me, the scariest thing is that this is some kind of parasite that takes over whatever they want to, but you never see what the true form is. So you never know what the monster actually is at all, or if it even exists.
And it does have many different forms. And every time it, I guess, goes to another body, it looks different every time. There were some cool scenes in that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not shitting on it. But
I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but just thinking of the fact of, okay, I never know what the monster is. How do I even deal with the monster? So and it was a close tie between that one and It for me. And It, you get to see its somewhat true form at some point in the movie, but you never see the things, I guess, is why I chose It over the other. Now, the It freaks me out, and it's in my honorable mentions, but it freaks me out more so just because it spends so much time as the clown more than anything.
He was so hard not to put in my list. And my last honorable mention, it kind of borderlines, I guess, that. So I guess I can kind of do that. But
yeah, so
the thing is, I said, okay, let me ask you this. Who do you think was the actual thing at the end of the movie? Well, was it Russell, Kurt Russell, or the other fella from Goliath?
I honestly don't know. That's a...
John Carpenter has went on record and act like everyone was an idiot for not knowing that it was Goliath. I forget God bless, I can't think of his guy's name. I love his voice. He's such a great actor too.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of it.
But he had like everybody was an idiot for not realizing it was him because he wasn't breathing. This man is in a heavy parka. If you're looking
Yeah.
at his breathing, I mean,
Well,
he's
that's the
like,
thing.
well, you should have noticed that he wasn't breathing. Like everyone was just dumbasses for not realizing this.
I
30
honestly,
years later.
I will be honest with you and say that I would have thought that the reason they left it open to interpretation is because maybe neither one actually was at this point.
That was always my take on it. Was like, neither one was. They had actually killed it off or it had escaped.
Yeah.
And they were so paranoid that they was going to wind up killing each other before it was all said and done.
Yeah, and I think that it's just the turning each other on each other is probably what makes that the scariest one to me. Just because you don't know you never know what it is, and then the fact of hey, we could be sitting here talking, and it could be you, it could be me. We're the last two.
That's what makes Zombies and The Walking Dead such a great, series. Is the fact that the humans are the real villain of the whole story. You got flesh eating monsters out there, don't get me wrong. But it's the
But it's the
human
fact,
dynamic, survival dynamic that you will fucking do whatever to survive.
that they turn feral
Horrible
or
things.
whatever, or they turn feral, or they turn evil just to get by, and yeah. So let's go to honorable mentions. You said you had a couple of those. What'd you have?
Well, my Xenomorph was one, so that's kind of off the books now. But the other one today, I didn't feel like we was going to do justice to this show if we didn't at least somewhat have him on here in some form, some shape, some fashion. Baba Yaga, the Boogeyman.
So I almost did that, but it's like there's so many different versions of that. How do you?
That's why I had to have him on here, is because no matter what your reiteration of him is, no matter how your interpretation goes, every child is fucking scared of the Boogeyman.
Oh yeah.
And there's no real outline of what he is, what he isn't. Other than if you look under the fucking bed, he's there. If you leave the closet door cracked just a hair, he might get out. I mean, it's that fear. I mean, which is what, Pennywise, comes into play. It's just that fear dynamic. Just nothing more than a fear creature, which is basically borderline Freddy Krueger, but.
Yeah, that I almost went there, and then I was like, and I say there's so many iterations. Like the iteration you're talking about, no matter what it is in Supernatural, is freaky. But then they've got the whole thing of is the boogeyman just the guy who comes and kidnaps your children, or the is it a person who's taking people? Is it a person who's killing people like a John Wick or whatever? So it's like, okay, if you're getting into those, it's a little bit less of a monster, more just a person, but.
My Boogeyman's a supernatural entity that.
Or is it the Muffin Man? Because the Muffin Man was like the first serial killer known, which is all the stories about that. If you've ever heard the actual stories, it's the guy who used to give out muffins and kidnap the children from neighborhoods and alleys. That's where the whole story of the Muffin Man came from. Do you know the Muffin Man of Drury Lane? I didn't know that until recently, just because I never looked at it. Then I saw.
I did not know that.
I saw a podcast and they're like, he's considered the first serial killer of that type. I was like, oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
That's knowledge.
My honorable mentions, he did not make mine, but I will say that I had three of them that were serious and a couple of funny ones, but also that were kind of like weird to me. So the Rancor being one of the serious ones, because Big Rob wanted to throw that one in, and I had to put that in posthumously for him since he couldn't be here with us this week. But and I get it. The Rancor is kind of the monster of Star Wars. You don't see it when the first person falls down there. You don't see it. You just hear them dying and this thing killing them and stuff. But then later on, because the way he dies, and then the owner, the trainer comes down there and has to deal with it. It's like, so he was just a pet at this point, I guess, instead of a monster. It's like, that's so weird.
Jedi did not do the Rancor justice. The Rancor has been shit on for 40 years until Book of Boba Fett.
Sure, go ahead.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, well, you froze for a second, or I did one, but yeah, the Rancor got shit on for 40 years up until Book of Boba Fett. I mean, can we be honest? The Book of Boba Fett is what done. You realize, oh shit, this is a badass.
But it was too late, because after the failure of HasLab, I didn't even care about him anymore.
You know what? If Book of Boba Fett had debuted 6 months before that HasLab, we might be having different results today.
I don't know. It might
Probably not.
It might have been a little bit better on the initial sale, but I still don't think it would have made it.
It's probably like the Nitro Arena we never got. But hey, we got Ramen Toy. Maybe they'll do the TNT Arena or something.
I'm just more interested in their Brave Star right now.
That looks really great, actually.
Let's see. My next honorable mention: Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. They were kind of creepy.
They look scary as hell, but if you really think about it, when they finally get you, they just send you to another time.
That's not as bad, but it's the fact that you cannot get away from them. Because even when they would put like a TV monitor on them and say like just watch the monitor, they would come through the screen. Like they could transgress time and space. So that was kind of weird.
Though they were scary looking to me, because I mean, even in their angel form, but when you got their true face and they're like with the fangs, I mean, that's like, oh shit, that's kind of scary. But when they get you, they just transport. Like I said, depending on what time you got transported to. Now, you know, depending on your ethnicity, and you got to transport at the wrong time, it could be bad. But you know, if you got transported to maybe 1960, you start collecting comic books.
One of my other honorable mentions is from around that time of maybe 58, 59. I can't remember when it came out, but The Blob. I don't know. There's something really creepy about the fact that it's just an amoeba from space, and it basically just eats everything in its path, and it's a force of nature destroying. I don't know what it is, and I didn't include the Predator in this just because I didn't think they're quite as scary as aliens. But then when you look at the Predator and you see those mandible jaws on it, which are kind of scary, what I'm really scared of is what the hell what are they eating that they need they need that mouth for?
Yeah, I kind of questioned their dietary tract myself. That's got to be something serious.
It's got to be something horrifying. If you need those big pincers to,
it's probably cracking skulls open, maybe.
Told you before, this is one of the scariest movies in the world to me is Oompa Loompas from Willy Wonka. And it's not the fact that it is nothing against them being little people or anything like that. It's just the fact of they just march around, sing this song, and do everything around you. And it's like, what are you? Why are you so creepy? And why do you just keep doing stuff?
I got one that I didn't initially think of to actually just now, and I'm surprised this just came to me. But there was a movie in the late '80s called Night of the Creeps. Do you actually remember this?
I remember the name. I don't remember everything about the movie. I remember the name of it.
They were like little slug-looking things, but once they got in you, they zombified you. And like if you got killed, there was about a shit ton of them out there. Just like the monster would come at you and he'd spit one of those in your fucking mouth and you become a zombie and it would just keep going. Tom Atkins was in it and he was like the coolest detective ever. He was like, thrill me. He just had these little one-liners and shit. He was like super cool. He's at like the peak of his popularity, so to speak. But yeah. And then there was this cool aside in it, like this zombie that he had killed, or I won't say a zombie. He killed this axe murderer that killed his girlfriend back in the 50s, 60s, or whatever. Buried it under her house, and then that, for whatever reason, somehow, some way, that thing come back because of these things. He had to kill it again. It's like, oh, that's pretty fucking neat. It's a great movie. Anybody, if you've never watched it, go watch Night of the Creeps. That and Fright Night are two shameless horror movies from the 80s you could not watch enough of.
The name of that sounds familiar. I just can't place it. So
watch it. There's some really good topless scenes. It's the 80s. There's sorority. Just saying.
For no reason other than to include them.
God bless the 80s.
But with that, let's move straight into Nerd Out. This part of the show, we ask random questions about topics of the day. We have to respond with no prep time. Here before, that's what we would love for you guys. Love to hear that as well. But Hassel, what do you have for a Nerd Out question this week?
Ooh, okay. So we're all monsters. What monster terrified you the most as a child? What was it that kept young Monster awake at night as a youngster?
Probably the ones that I had the most. I guess if I was going to have nightmares, the most that I would have had nightmares about would have been Freddy, just because he lived in a nightmare realm, so it kind of resonated to when you fall asleep and you dream about it. But outside of that, yeah, I don't know. Outside of that one, I'd probably just have to roll with that, just because I don't remember having nightmares about too many others. I would tell you that there was one that my aunt, Sam Hain was the main villain of it. And I know you would probably figure it out as we go along. I just can't remember what movie it was, but for whatever reason, that movie when it was playing was one of the scariest ones. But just because I was not a scary movie person, and that one just freaked me out because it was one of those, like, she wasn't going to turn it off. You didn't have nowhere else to go in the house because it was a small apartment, so you're stuck in the living room listening to it if you're not watching it. So
yeah, you've been cutting kind of in and out a little bit, but to me, it's honestly Freddy, without a doubt. There was about a 4-year span from 85 to 89 where young Hassel was shit scared of Freddy. Because, like, literally, and I don't know, I know I've told you the story, but I don't know if I told it on here or not, but literally, I was only 5-year-old in A Nightmare on Elm Street at a theater. Because my mother drugged my ass to go see this. And don't get me wrong, that's probably why I'm so fucking weird and love horror today. But we go watch this movie. It terrifies the shit out of me. I go home, and the room I had in the house we had at the time had this little weird window. It was like almost like a basement window in a normal house. So there was this light that always shined across because she couldn't find a curtain for it. So I was laying there in bed, and I was like, I'm staring out the window just knowing Freddy's going to get my ass. I finally doze off, and I have a dream that Freddy is chasing me on these docks. And I remember this dream vividly today. Freddy's chasing me on these docks. And it's the scene from Scooby-Doo. I jump in the fucking drum with a little hole. It's literally the opening from Scooby-Doo. Got the top on it. And, of course, I'm peeking out for Freddy. He pulls the top back, and he's about to get my ass. I wake up. I'm scared shitless. I go to my living room. My mom's in there asleep on the couch. Saturday Night Live's on. My mother's not a nurturer. You know Holly. She is not a nurturer. She's not the one, but like, oh, baby, come here. She'll beat the hell out of you, send you back to bed. So I just kind of nuzzle up at the edge of the couch there, like, maybe mom's going to protect me. And maybe she won't beat the shit out of me for being out of bed. Well, I'm trying to go back to sleep, and Saturday Night Live's on. And by that time, they played the fucking trailer for Nightmare on Elm Street. And, dude, I shit you not, I screamed bloody murder. Woke her up, scared her ass. She beat the shit out of me, grabbed me by the back of the neck, and threw me back in the bed. So, yeah, there was about a 4-year span after that where I was fucking terrified. It was really... she made me go watch part 3 at the theater again to try to break me of my fear. It didn't work. It wasn't until part 4 when they had the kind of campy Freddy, the beginnings of the campy Freddy,
yeah,
that I was able to say, okay. And then at that point on, then I could go back and enjoy the others, but that was a good 4-year span there. He fucked me up pretty good.
yeah, I can feel you there, because that's the one that got me. Like I said, out of any others, that was the worst one to me as far as if I was going to have a nightmare.
So what is your nerd out of the week?
So I will put some disclaimers on this for some disqualifications. So we can't use things that have been cast in different roles like vampires, werewolves, Frankenstein, Godzilla, but any other monsters that are out there that we have seen.
Okay, you're back now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think your internet's perfectly fine.
The boys probably been there playing some damn game while we're betting.
quick ask, what monster could you that hero of any sort that hasn't been in the past?
Let me start our router or something. Hey, I can see you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can actually hear and see you now.
Okay. Real quick, my question was just if there's any monster you could see being in a hero role that we haven't seen before, meaning like no Godzilla, no vampires, werewolves. We've seen fill those roles before. Who could you see that hasn't been in that role before, being the hero of a
That's a damn good question, Monster. I'm gonna be honest. That's like really wow. Okay. Ooh, damn. I gotta think about that for a second. That's actually a really good one. Uh, huh. Wow, you have stumped the hassle good on this one right here. I'm gonna be honest. That is, because my mind is like all over the place right now. What if? I'm gonna go 100% outside the box here. What if Lucifer and his fallen angels in this story were to go against the corrupt church and go through and start smiting those that are, on the outside would seem holy, the false prophets, so to speak, because they're trying to redeem their and get their redemption.
that could be an interesting storyline.
True, true. I mean, just pure fiction here, people. Just saying, but you know, I can see I can flesh out about 12 issues of that.
So, uh, kind of similar. I said, what if the silence? What if you use them in a hero like role, like because they're there to if it gets too far. Maybe they're. I'm going to assume I froze up on you again.
You did. You did.
Technical difficulties. This is what happens when you record after dark.
Something told me to restart my router, actually. I seen lights were like kind of flickering earlier, and I was like, surely we good.
Did you hear my answer there? I was like the silence, keeping history on track and stuff.
You were starting to kind of go into your reasoning behind that, but yeah, I can actually see that.
Yeah, we won't belabor it too.
What about the Cybermen?
That would be an interesting take.
Doctor Who has so many great villains. Well, we need to do actual Doctor Who episode, I feel. I'm not sure what we haven't, or if we have.
We have in the past, but we didn't focus just on the monsters or the villains.
Maybe instead of focusing on the doctors, we need to do a Doctor Who villain episode. Where my internet not freezing. I have to get the gremlin in here. He does a pretty good evil laugh every now and then. I've taught him to do the.
Oh, that's a good one. But with that, since we are
to be an evil genius,
since we are experiencing technical difficulties here after dark, let's go and get on. Mr. Wes Hartman, comic creator of DC and Marvel renown. You can check out his own Cosmic Roots imprint with series like The Savage Sasqanaut. You can find him on Facebook at Cosmic Root Studios, on Instagram at The Sasqanaut, and his website, check daily. Formerly the host of Fueled by Weird podcast, I've seen they are changing the name to.
Well, he posted something today about Fueled by Weird, so I'm not sure. I think he might be coming back on track with that.
What I saw was they were changing the name. He said after several years of being that, they were changing. It was we because I read it earlier, but I don't remember because that was a long time ago today. Diorama, Seth Stafford. You can find Mama. You can find her on Instagram at Kushimama and on YouTube at Doodle's Toy Report and her new channel, The Collector Sector. Mr. August Aguilar from Strange Film Studios. Looks like they're just wrapping up shooting their gifts, so be on the lookout for that coming pretty soon. James B. Jefferson, the creator of Warrior Island. You can catch updates on the comic and the movie adaptation on his website at warriorisland.com. And of course, our extended member, Rob, who sadly here today. Our next types of interview.
No Chinese food.
See, there's a lag, so he didn't even know I said it until afterward.
I was trying to get there. I heard Big Rob's. I was like, oh, there we go. You robbed me of this Mediacom. Damn you.
Check out this channel for new reviews and unboxings of awesome items and stories from life on the road, and lately a lot of good reviews from Big Rob. And remember, while you're checking all these folks out, check out our sponsor. These you can find it. It's your turn if you can hear me.
Hey, well, if you would like to check us out, we are on all manner of social media. We are on everything from Fire Stick TV. We are on Spotlight Media, Roku TV, Spotlight Media. You can find us on YouTube via the Nerdy Manroom Show. We're very, very close to giving our giveaway of the Michael Myers mask. If you can finally like, subscribe, share with all your friends and family. We're on Instagram, the Nerdy Manroom Show, at Facebook, Hassel Hutchison via the Nerdy Manroom Show, and Twitter, Nerdy MR Show.
That brings us to a close today, but join us here next time. We're going to discuss epic crossovers. Until then, live nerdy and do the monster mash.